My, oh my. I could have just kept on singing for quite a while. Well, it's so good to be with you here. We feel a warm welcome and appreciate the opportunity. When Luke contacted me about coming, we talked about a date, and then it was October the 5th, so I thought that would work out. And be glad to fill in while Steve's are gone. I trust that their sabbatical will be a good experience for them. Well, then later Luke said, we're going to have communion that Sunday. Do you still want to come? I said, sure, I'll come. But I said, I would rather, when it's time for the emblems to be passed, that someone from your own congregation would do that. I just think it would be better. But I'd be happy to be here and preach and partake in communion. I look forward to that. What a blessing. As I think about today, I hope that you've been thinking about communion before just today. We talk about a celebration of communion. And I guess it is in one sense. But you know, when I think of that, then on the other hand, my spirit is heavy because of what it represents. Because of what Jesus went through in my place. I could never pay for my sins. Jesus did that. But I think the thing that hurts Jesus' heart the most is when we don't accept that forgiveness. When we reject all that he has gone through for us. You know, I've pastored there at Fairview for 37 years and retired in 2016 and still help out occasionally when pastors are gone. And that's good for me. I appreciate the opportunity of coming here, different places I've been. Study is good. I enjoy studying and preaching. But it's heavy today. I don't take this lightly as we think about communion and what we're going to be doing here. I'll explain the title on my message. We'll get started with that. I'll take the stripes. The story I read was of a king that was king over a land, a country, and he had a lot of laws and he had a lot of consequences if you failed to keep that law. The people appreciated their king, and he appreciated the people. A good relationship. As time went on, the treasurer approached the king and he said, we're short some money in the treasury. Somewhere it's gotten away. And so they did some investigating and discovered that it was the king's own mother had taken this. She was a widow. She was not well-to-do. And she got into the treasury and took some money. Well, the consequences for stealing was 40 stripes. And the community of people wondered, is the king really going to carry this out now that it's his own mother? And she's not well-to-do? What's he going to do about this? The day came for justice, and as many people gathered in the courtyard to see what's going to happen. The king was there, and of course his mother, and the man that was in charge of giving the 40 stripes was there and getting ready to do that, and the king's there among all the people. And just before the man did what he was supposed to do, the king said, "Halt!" And he walked up to his mother, and he said, "I'll take the stripes. I'll take the stripes." So he proceeded to take his jacket and his shirt off, and he took the 40 stripes for his mother. So impressed was that community of people, and their appreciation continued to grow and abound for what the king had done. I'm thinking of Jesus and what he did in my place. He took the stripes for me. I deserved to have them, but Jesus in his love and mercy took that for me. I want to think about that today as we go through this message. And as we think about communion, I want us to think about where I want to take you back to where it first started. Communion was there in the upper room, is where Jesus instituted, but where did it come from? Way back in the Old Testament in Exodus chapter 12, and I'd urge you, I don't know how many of you have read through Genesis and Exodus. There is just so much good information there. Very interesting. I know you get to Leviticus, and then Numbers is kind of a book that I don't enjoy the greatest, but it's interesting. As every year I read the Bible through and get to Numbers, and I'm thinking, here we go. This tribe had so many, and that tribe had so many, and on and on. But anyhow, Genesis and Exodus are just tremendously interesting books. But I want to start at the Passover, and that's in Exodus chapter 1, and 12 is where it was instituted, Exodus 12. But the children of Israel had been in the land. Remember, Joseph was sent down there when he was 17 years old and sent there by his brothers, sold them to the Ishmaelites, which were their half-blood brothers. And they went down there and sold him to Potiphar, a captain of the guard. And you know the story of Joseph became the right-hand man to the king Pharaoh. There was nobody higher than Joseph. And so they lived, and finally his brother, 22 years, there was a drought, national drought. And 22 years later, his brothers came down there to get food because they heard that Pharaoh, under the leadership of Joseph, had stored food. They had 7 good years, then 7 bad years. And so his brothers come down there, and they hadn't seen each other for 22 years. Anyhow, they made themselves known. They moved all Israel, just really interesting, moved them all down there. The Bible says there were 70 of the Israelites, of the Jewish people, tribe of Jacob, that moved down there. 70 people. Now, they lived there for 430 years. In that time, they just expanded in number. When Moses led them out of Egypt, there was well over 1 million people. And they started with 70. Now, as they were down there, the Bible tells us in Exodus chapter 1 that a new king became king, a new Pharaoh, all in Egypt. Every king was a Pharaoh. But the Pharaoh that knew Joseph had died, and Joseph and all his brothers had died. So you have a new king now that didn't know, no connection to Joseph and all that family, and they saw what was happening as far as numbers developing and going on. We've got to put a stop to this, so they demanded that all the boy babies that are born will be thrown in the Nile River. And if you have any idea and you want to look up something in a commentary online or whatever you do, go look up the Nile River. It is not a place that you want to go swimming in at all. Anyhow, the boy babies were to be thrown in there, and you know the story about Moses was survived. His mother put him down there in a little basket boat, and so on. Pharaoh's daughter took him and grew him up, and then eventually he ended up out in the wilderness. God called him to lead his people out after 430 years. These people, the Israelites, were down there. They were slaves to Pharaoh and his people. They built one city after another. They were the ones that were out there making brick day after day after day, building buildings for Pharaoh and his court. When Moses came to Pharaoh and told him, the God says, I want my people to go out of Egypt. We want to make sacrifice in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey him? He found out who the Lord was in a big way. Well, so they made things worse for the children of Israel. Now, instead of making so many bricks per day, you go out in the fields and gather your own straw and make bricks the same amount as you did before when we brought the straw to you. I'll tell you what, that's when the light at the end of a tunnel is the headlamp of an oncoming train. The children of Israel had it awfully rough down there, awfully rough. They were slaves. God said after 430 years, it's time you move out of here. Egypt is a type of the world. You aren't staying here. You've got a better place to go. I've got the land of Canaan waiting for you to enter in. And so Moses was given the task to lead them out. In the process, God showed 10 different plagues on the children of Israel. You just need to read the account. I'm leaving so much out because I'm watching that clock and I shouldn't be doing that. But there's nothing that people hate worse than a long-winded preacher that doesn't get anything said. But I'll try and do my best. As Moses was there and he came to Pharaoh and they wanted to leave to get out of the land, and God began to show his plagues. You know, there was all the water, everywhere the water turned to blood. And there was flies. If you're a fly in my house, my wife will get you. She absolutely despises flies. Big deal. Let them do their thing. Anyhow. They had flies, they had grievous boils on livestock, they had hail, they had just one thing after another, but God was doing this all along to show his greatness. He wanted Pharaoh to see. Remember, Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" And he was going to show Pharaoh who God is. Finally, the 10th plague was the death of the firstborn. All that information is in Exodus chapter 12. How you're supposed to take a lamb, you're supposed to gather a lamb out of the flock. The very best one, you're supposed to have it in your house for 14 days. You're supposed to observe that lamb. There's supposed to be no blemish in that lamb. The night of the previous to your departure, you're to kill that lamb and you're supposed to eat of that lamb. Anything that's left over, you burn with fire. Well, and it also says in Exodus chapter 12, verse about 46, there's not a bone to be broken of that lamb. Prophecy for Jesus on the cross also, there's not a bone to be broken of Jesus. That lamb that the Israelites, those lambs that were killed and eaten that night, they took of the blood of those lambs and they put it on the side posts of their doors and a cross on the top, the lintel. And the Bible says that the Lord told them, "I will pass through the land tonight. When I see the blood, I will pass over you." Wherever there was no blood applied, there was going to be the death of the firstborn. How many firstborns do we have in this congregation? I'm not, but how many? Oh, we've got a number. If you wouldn't apply the blood, you wouldn't be here, so to speak. I wondered, were there any Jewish people that night that didn't put blood on their doorpost? I don't know if there was or not. But the Bible tells me that in every household in Egypt, there was at least one death in that household. At least one. There could have been more. A son, perhaps a father. But the whole idea there goes to the cross that we're here to celebrate this morning. That Jesus gave his blood, shed his blood in our place. That lamb that was a perfect lamb had to be without blemish. It could not have any blemish in it whatsoever. Jesus was the perfect lamb that gave his life. There was nobody that ever walked the face of this earth that was able to pay sacrifice or give life in behalf of sin other than Jesus. Nobody else qualified. Because the Bible tells me in Romans chapter 3, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There is none righteous, no, not one. None of us can merit our own salvation. We'll never make it. Doesn't matter how many of us have previous generations of pastors and deacons and all that. That doesn't hand down. We don't inherit those kinds of things. But as they applied the blood that night, then they walked out of Egypt, started for Canaan. And of course, they got to the Red Sea. And what are we going to do now? That Red Sea is no little body of water. That is a huge, huge body of water. Miles across that body. Deep in places, deeper than others. But according to what I found in the Bible and commentaries and so on, they found the narrowest part of the Red Sea, which is still miles, and they walked through there. God miraculously divided that. But the whole thing is, as they got out of Egypt and walked toward the Red Sea, here comes the Egyptians. Now think about it. Think of Pharaoh here. He lost all his labor force. There they go. They didn't just strike. They struck out. I mean, they took off and left. What am I going to do? So they up and after him with all his men and his chariots to go get them back again, because we need to continue to build buildings. Well, here were the Israelites against the Jordan, or the Red Sea, not the Jordan, Red Sea. If I say that wrong, you know what I mean. But anyhow, and here comes the Egyptians behind him. So they cried out to Moses. You know, again and again and again, after they came out, they said, why didn't we just stay back there and work for the Egyptians? I think, come on. You was in slavery back there. I tell you what, when I became a Christian, I never had a desire to go back in my old life. Not once. The joy of the Lord was so tremendous, and the grace of God and the presence of God. He's my best friend. I talk to him all the time. But as the children of Israel were there against the Red Sea, and here comes the Egyptian, God took a cloud and put it between them. A cloud that on one side gives light to the Israelites, and on the other side is darkness. So it put a halt on the Egyptians. You can't see in the dark. At least I can't. So God provided. But interestingly enough, as they were there by the Red Sea and got that, complained to Moses, here we are, and they're coming, what are we going to do? Moses gets a word from the Lord. I'm thinking, come on. We're in dire straits. We've got to get a move on. And then God says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Wow. At a time like that, you don't want to stand still. I want an answer, and I want it now. Well, you got the answer. Stand still. You know, doesn't God do that to us sometimes? We're needing some answers to something we're facing. We want an answer now. We live in a world today that is so immediate. Everything is bing, 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 you know, just instant. People complain if they can't do, and by the way, Roy, I was in that line of traffic yesterday with a tractor and 2 loads of beans, and I never in my life parked on the north side of Highway 22 waiting among semis and other tractors and more semis to get on the scale. That never has happened before, but it did this week. Talk about busy. But as I said, we want answers and we want it now. And God says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. How many times do we just have to stop? We're not going anywhere. God says, you got to wait on me. I've got the answers. I've got it all under control. But it's hard for us as human beings to get a hold of that. But anyhow, they left, got through the Red Sea, and on they went. The Egyptians came into the Red Sea. God had divided this, told Moses, take his rod out there and hold over the Red Sea, and the waters departed. I mean, there was walls of water because this thing wasn't just 10 feet deep. This was hundreds of feet deep. How would you like to walk through that? I'd be watching those walls pretty closely. Make sure they stay put. But there was Moses, and after everybody got through on dry land, get all these people through there, God told Moses, take your rod and let the waters come back after the Egyptians were all in the middle. Not going to get anywhere while it was too late. The Bible says the next day they saw nothing but dead bodies there in the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his men. Who is the Lord that I should obey him? Pharaoh found out, didn't he? And in the course of the plagues that God gave on the children of Israel, time and time again, his own men said, let them go. We're all going to be destroyed. But he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't listen. In Luke chapter 22, we're going to switch. We've looked at where the Passover came. The Passover came the night that they applied the blood to their door, and the death angel did not visit there. When the death angel saw the blood applied to the door, death had already done its work there. The lamb was slain, and the blood was applied, and they were free. Exactly what Jesus did for us. The lamb is slain, and the blood has been applied, and I'm free. I'm free. Luke 22, chapter 46, or Luke 22, 15, Jesus was there coming with his disciples. He said, with desire, I have desired that I eat this Passover with you before I suffer. After all these years, the Jewish people keeping this sacrifice, yearly sacrifice of Passover, Jesus was bringing something better for us. We no longer keep the Passover. Today, we observe what we call communion, which is a result of the Passover. The Passover is now history. We have communion. Jesus met in the upper room with his 12 disciples.